Boom, 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 boom. All right. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Shekalim Daf Hey. We are going to start by continuing to learn about the inverse relationship between a Kalboin and the Meiser Behem. And as we explained, that when a father passes away and he leaves his estate to his sons, before they divide the estate, it's called a Tfusa Sabayis or a Tefisa Sabayis. And we don't consider the sons being partners, but we really consider the estate to belong to the father. Yeah, the children are in the place of their father. And therefore, if the half a shekel for each one of the sons is going to be paid from the estate of the father, even though, let's say, one seller will be given for two sons, and as we learned in the Mishnah, that even the Tanach holds that if you're giving for the half a shekel a coinage, that's not the exact half a shekel. You have to also add the kolboin. But we also learned in the Mishnah that if I give a gift for you, not as a loan, but as a gift, then there is an exemption of this adding of the kolboin. So whenever the one seller, which is being paid for two of the sons, is coming from the tefisa sabayis from the estate, then the sons or the estate is exempt from the kolboin. But on the other hand, that inverse relationship, that the exception, being again meiser behema, is if the animals were not born into your flock. So if you purchased it or partners, but we don't consider tfusa sabayis partnership. It was born into the flock of the father. It's still in the possession, so to say, of the state of the father. So there's going to be a chiv in meiser behema. And the same thing was in reverse, that if the sons decided to break up this tfisa sabayis, and then for whatever reason, they reconstructed the partnership, even though right now things are exactly the way they were before, but that's considered a partnership. And therefore, now they will be exempt of Meiser Behema. But now, if they choose to pay together one seller, for both of them, they're going to be chayiv in the kalban. That is what we learned yesterday. And today we will continue to learn that this inverse relationship is not always the case. There are scenarios where either both will be chayiv v'kalban, chayiv v'Meiser Behema, and there'll be other scenarios that both will be exempt. There'll be a ptur in paying the kolbain as well as a ptur of Meiser Behema. Now, at the end of this Perek, we're going to learn as to what did the Beis HaMikdash do with the kolbain, and there's going to be no less than 5 opinions in the Tanoim. We're going to start today the new Perek, beginning with, first of all, when the people in charge of bringing those half a shekels to Yerushalayim, when they traveled, they were allowed to exchange the silver half shekels into a coinage that had a lot more value, simply to facilitate and to diminish the amount of schlepping they need to do. However, there are nuances. They can only exchange it on a golded, minted coin, and they may not exchange it, let's say, on precious jewelry, in order to limit the risk of the item that they are bringing losing its value. I know that currencies also lose their value, but it's relative to Shava Kesef, a lot more stable. We're going to learn as to what happens if the half a shekel that the shliach was bringing to the Beis HaMikdash, what happens if it gets lost before it reaches the Beis HaMikdash? When is it do we say that the owners have to replace it? When is it that we say that it is the loss to the Beis HaMikdash? We're going to be learning about an oath that the messenger will have to take. And we're going to be learning, therefore, a little bit about Shemer Chinam and about Shemer Sachar. We're going to be learning how in the Beis HaMikdash there were 2 pushkas. One was called Tiklin Chadatin. Indeed, in there you place the Shekalim of this new year. And one was called the Old Shekalim, the new Shekalim and the Old Shekalim. And we're going to clarify exactly when did the Shekalim go into the Pushka of the Old Shekalim and what was that used for, etc. We're going to learn on Daf Hey Amid Beza Mishnah about what were to happen if I asked you to take my half a shekel and to give it to the Beis HaMikdash, and you decided that when you gave it to the Beis HaMikdash, you gave it on your own behalf. Now, we're not speaking about the theft part of it, but we're speaking about is there a chiyuv of me'ilah? When will you be chayiv the me'ilah? Which will also lead us into many pratim in the laws of me'ilah. Me'ilah meaning if someone misappropriates property that belongs to the temple in certain circumstances, then the misappropriator will have to give back that money to the Beis Hamikdash and add a fifth and bring a carbon asham me'ilah, many pratim in a me'ilah, and much, much more. Let us start on the Abdallah Amid Beis. We left off 2 lines before the bottom of the Amid by the dot. Again, we began learning about the normal inverse relationship between Kalban and Maser Behemah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam v'shachar v'yori. Says the Gemara that Reb Chia Omar Rabbi Yirmiyah Bo'ai, I have to get used to the wordings, that Rabbi Chia said that it was asked in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah, the Lama Leis Non Amrin, why don't we say that? That it's not always in verse. Sometimes both the Kalbain and the Meiser Behemah will be Chal, the Chiyuv will exist, daf Hey on the top. And likewise in the reverse, Upahamim Shehem Peturim Mizeh Umizeh. And the Gemara wants to clarify, Heich Avida, what will be the case? What will be the case where it's not in verse? We will skip over the parentheses. So we're going down a couple of lines. And the Gemara explains, like Gavaldik, when Cholku Hana Chasim, a father leaves an estate, and let's divide the estate into 2 categories, livestock and everything else, including money. If they divide the Chasim, they divide all of the estate, but V'loi Cholku HaBehema, touch it. So as far as the animals are concerned, it's still called Tefilla Sabayis, which is not a partnership. So they are Chayiv and Meiser Behemah. Being that the Nechasim were divided and then they reconstituted a partnership, so it's not being paid by the father, it's being paid by them, then they'll also be Chayiv to pay the Kalban. Chayav Mazel Bozer. And the same thing in the reverse. What happens if the children decided, Cholku HaBehemah, they only divided the livestock and then they made a partnership? But now it's behemoths that belong to Shutvim, which is exempt of Meiser Behemah. But so all the other assets, including the cash, is still, so to say, in the possession of the father. It's called Tfisa Sabayis or Tfusa Sabayis, and therefore, again, P'tura Mizeh Mizeh. So he's not just making an observation, but it's being worded as a boye, as a question. Like, why wasn't this mentioned as well? When you read the Mishnah, it sounds like it's always going to be, this one, whichever chayiv b'zeh, pater b'zeh, chayiv b'zeh. So answers the Gemara, Amar Rav Mana, da'at Amar, that which you say, that when the estate was divided, and the estate is divided, or the animal is divided, it's not such a simple statement to make, which is why it was not made. There was another nuance, there's another crease in this scenario. Let's say that they only divided the assets. They did not divide the animals. So is the assets considered divided? And then if they reconstitute, now they're considered partners, and therefore let's say they'll be chayiv in the kalboin. That's only if the majority of the value of the estate was not in livestock, because it's an amazing concept. Even if they decided to divide the assets, but since the livestock, which represents the majority of the value of the estate of the father, was not divided, hein, iker, hanachasim, so we also don't view the assets to have been divided. Amazing, you follow the Raiv, and therefore they will also be exempt from paying the kalbain, because even the assets are considered tfisa sabayis, even though they made a division and they reconstituted, then they made a partnership. And therefore, l'chayda, that's the answer, that giving this scenario where they are on the same track has another nuance in it, so it gets too complicated. So therefore, it's right that the Mishnah only spoke about the general inverse relationship. Weiter. Rav Avin Amar Rab Shammai Boy. Same kind. Rav Avin says that Rab Shammai asked the following question. That means he was trying to understand the din of the Mishnah. Right, when there is tefusa sabayis, when they did not divide the estate, it's not a partnership, and therefore the chayiv and meiser behema. Still, he's asking at poitrim and kalbin, why would they be exempt from the kalbin? Like he's asking, maybe, yeah, the chayiv and meiser behema, that's l'chumra, but to say that it's mamish considered the father's money to the point that you're going to be makel, that they should not have to pay the kalbin, He's trying to understand how that works. So Amalei, that Leishanyahi, this cannot be different from the normal scenario where Shuhu Noisan Sela Echad Shlema. Yeah, if I give one seller from my half a shekel, and as a gift, the other half for you, I don't have to pay the cowboy. Yeah. So when it's coming from the estate of the father, it's viewed as the father is giving it as a gift for both of his sons. So the Gemara says, Me'ato oy bazoi. Okay. So he's trying to understand the other side. That now what happens if they did divide their assets? They did divide the estate, but now they went back. They said, you know what? We don't like this division. Let's go back to the way it used to be. And now they're partners. So why don't we say that it went back to the way it used to be? And therefore, why don't we say that they should still be chayavim b'maisa behema? Because we should not view them as partners, because they reconstituted how it was. Why isn't the din of Tefisa Sabayas reenacted? And they should be Peturim and Akalbin. Why does it say in our Mishnah, Chayavim b'Kalbin Peturim b'maisa behema? So answers the Gemara that Rabbah says in the name of Abba Barafuna that he Shnei Achim. Sheyarshu as Aviyim, he Shnei Gisim, Sheyarshu as Chameim. If you have two brother-in-laws, or really two strangers, and they make a partnership. No, they're not called, there's no Tfusa Sabayis. That's two people making partners. So if once the brothers chose to divide the estate, even if they reconstituted, that's it. Now, yes, they are considered bona fide partners, and therefore, Maisa Behemoth will be pater, because that's the din that animals that belong to Shutfas are not animals upon which there's an obligation to give Maisa Behemoth. And on the other hand, if me and you are giving together one seller, we are chayiv to give a kalboin. L'chachamim one, let Ameir two. Okay, now the final topic of the Perek is lehechem hoyu hakablonis leifim. Now the half a shekels were generally used for that year's communal karbanos. It's just good to point out that when many Yidden gave the half a shekel, when God blessed our people with more numbers, then there was a surplus, and we'll learn later. It's not that the money only went for the karbanos tzibur, but there was a system. Question is, what do you do with these karbanos? Now, Rav Meir oimer l'shkalim. Exactly what was done with the half a shekel, exactly that was used. That was the kalban. And guys, it makes so much sense. Rav Meir l'shitasi. What did we learn yesterday? That Rabbi Meir holds that the giving of the kalban is a din d'oiraisa. The giving of the half a shekel is a chiyuv on every giver. If me and you give together one seller, we have to give two kalbanos, because when Hashem said to give a half a shekel, he said give a half a shekel and a kalban. Perfect. So therefore, whatever, it's part of the half a shekel. However, all the other opinions, the Chachamim who hold that it's not a din. If I only give a half a shekel, I don't have to give a kalban. So it's not part of the half a shekel. So now we're going to have another four shittas. Rab Lezer Oimer, you know what becomes clear? That the Yerushalmis didn't skip the aleph. The big Chachamim, they skipped, I know the aleph. So you have Lezer instead of Eliezer. Remember, Chad Omar, the Echad Omer, it's Charno. You'll see many times there's an aleph less. So Rabbi Lezer Omer, Linadava, as we learned, that when we don't want for the Mizbeach to sit idle, whenever there was, for whatever reason, there was no karbanos being offered on the Mizbeach, there were a few people on the Beis HaMikdash, so then there would be a special fund, and they would take money, and they would buy a carbon oila, and they called that carbon, it was a communal carbon, it was called kates, figs of the altar, which means dessert of the altar, simply for the altar not to sit idle. Third sheet is Rab Shimon Shuzuri Yomer, the Kuyat Zohav Tzipil Beis Kachim Kachim, that they would buy sheet of beaten gold, and they would use it to cover the inner walls, the inner tiles of the Kachim Kachim. What did we also learn yesterday? Like Zeh Yitnu, Kazeh Yitnu, the Mazbeah, the Matbeah Shal Eish, that what lines with gold, the holiest part of a Yid, our enthusiasm in Yiddishkeit, when we go beyond the letter of the law, even though this became the letter of the law, we have to give it, but it represents giving a bit more, go 101 times. Avadai versus loy avadai. The Nasa Yomer, now we're going to already give a little bit of an intro for the next Perek. How did the money get there? Or I'll go even better. Who exactly exchanged those monies? So sometimes the Beis HaMikdash hired local banks to do a service, that they should be the ones exchanging for everyone the half a shekel, gathering the half a shekel. They have to get paid. One second, you can't really pay them, they're working for the Beis HaMikdash, but the concept of schar batolam, like we have by a teacher. since during that time they were not doing other things, for that they can get paid. So the kolbanos who went for the shulchanim, which means for the bankers, literally it means the table, because they used to mamash sit by a table to exchange money without drawers, where there was transparency, where people knew no one can so to say pocket a coin. And the final Ashita was another question, aside of the money exchange, how did it get to the Beis HaMikdash? So there were systems. Sometimes people were paid to take it there. Where did that money come from? So for travel expenses. And that we say, and God willing, we are starting the second Perek in Shekalim. Guys, Shekalim, there'll be a lot more Agadata later. It's going to be a Gavaldik Gemara, jam-packed, a lot of information is needed, and God will give us the right words to make it as clear as we could. Says the Mishnah, says the Perek, we call every Mishnah a halacha, which that Mishnayos are halachas. Call Hashoina halachis b'chol yom. We refer to Mishnayos originally. Halacha Aleph Mas Nisan. Number one, says the Mishnah. We're living in LA, and the Beis HaMikdash, God willing, is going to be built today. And we're going to send our half of shekels right now. We're going to go to the Beis HaMikdash to bring our carbon Pesach, but we want to get our shekels there. It's already the Chodesh Nisan, but we want to get it there ASAP. Okay, so let's say that someone is going to go, they're going to take the direct El Al flight, but they're going to bring all the half of shekels from the Yidden here in Los Angeles. You know how heavy it weighs? So the question is, can you exchange it on something that has greater value? So says the Mishnah that mitzarfin shkalim lid darkoinos. You know what the word darkon is? A name of a golden coin. It was called the darkon. Darkon is from the word derech. When people traveled, well, today we invented, after coins, bills, anaya chiddush, a piece of paper, which is amazing. But before they came to this concept, so they had coins, but at least a golden coin weighed, let's say, the same amount of a silver, but it was worth a lot more. So you can exchange it on golden coins, but the nekuda is not on a glob of gold, not on a golden bar. It has to be a coin, it has to be a minted coin. Why? Okay, next now says the Mishnah, we're going to learn that in the Beis HaMikdash there were 13 shofros. Guys, shofar doesn't mean what you use to blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. Shofar is what we call a pushka. It was called a shofar because the place through which you put the coin was very narrow. Like our pushkas, there's like just a little opening, because they didn't want for people to stick their hands in there and take the money out. Okay, in the Beis HaMikdash there were 13 such chests, tzedakah pushkas. We'll call it a shofar, or it was called a keren. By the way, you know, your keren Ashana, why is it called a keren? Tzedakah funds until today is called a horn, because it was called an Mishnah shofar. Just means it's a fund that's set up in a way where the money in is easy. Money out, you have to have 2 signatories, or money out, a few people see the bank account. That's why it's called a keren. Now, 2 of the 13, one was called tiklin chadatin, which means the new shkalim, and one was called tiklin atikin. I'll just explain what that is. If you went to the Beis HaMikdash, if I went to the Beis HaMikdash and we didn't want to send it through a shliach, we put our half a shekel in the shekel box. But if we get there before the Chodesh Nisan, is a chamatoy v'manoim. What happens if we get there after the Chodesh Nisan? And we learned that 3 times a year they used to withdraw the shkalim. Doesn't matter. If we got there after the first truma, we put it in there. Even if we got there after Shavuos, we put it in there. But what happens if we got there after 2 weeks before Sukkot? They already withdrew it for that year the 3rd time. Then what would be the point of putting it into that box? But on the other hand, I didn't give a half a shekel this year yet. So there would be another pushka called tiklin atikin. The old doesn't mean from the prior year. But let me ask you another question. After they withdraw the half a shekels the 3rd time, what happens if there was a surplus? That's called shiurei, the shirayim of the lishka. So we'll learn later. It was used for certain things. So if I came late, I didn't send it with a shliach, I want to deliver it personally, but I came late, I came after the 3rd truma, then I would put it in the box called the old shkalim. It was this year's. I did the mitzvah late, I did the mitzvah, and whatever the shayara halishka would be used for, they would also take from the tiklin atik. Now says the Mishnah that just like there were shofars in the Mikdash, kach hoyu shofars b'medina. So in every city they would have every city other Yerushalayim. If you live in Yerushalayim, go to the Beis Hamikdash. But here in LA, they're going to set up a physical box, a shofar, and people can deposit their shkalim there. We're going to see in the Gemara that you only had the tiklin chadatin. There was no tiklin atikin ibn Medina. Next. So we sent our shkalim, we filled up the box, and we sent it via a messenger, via a shliach. And what happens if, God forbid, it was stolen or the shliach lost it? Now, quickly recapping, a shliach that's taking money is called a custodian. Now, whether he's paid or not is of consequence. Remember, if he's not being paid, shomer chinam is only going to be liable if he was negligent by pshia. If he's being paid to do his job, he's called a paid custodian. Then even geneva va'aveda, normal theft and normal loss is something that had he made a greater effort, he could have prevented, he would be chayiv thereof. Let's understand right now that we're speaking about a shomer chinam, even though we'll see details in the Gemara. So in other words, if he gets lost or if it gets stolen, he won't be chayiv to compensate. The shliach is off the hook. The question is, whose money was lost? Was it that since it didn't come to the Beis Hamikdash, so our money was lost, so we have to give another half a shekel? Or since we already put it in the pushka, it belongs to the temple? Oh, says the Mishnah like this: Im nitrama hatruma. If in the Beis Hamikdash they already did the first withdrawal, and as the Tiklan Chadat in the Mefaidish tells us, as we'll see in the Gemara, that the Mishnah is following the concept that when they removed the shkalim from the room of the Lishka in the Beis Hamikdash, it wasn't only for the people who already had their shkalim in there. It was also for the people whose shkalim was on the way. It was even for the people that didn't take it out of their own pocket. It was for everyone's shkalim. Which means once you did the withdrawal, we view the shkalim that are en route already belonging to the temple. So whose shkalim were lost? The temple shkalim were lost. The people already did their mitzvah. Let's read it inside. But nishbaim, the messengers have to swear to the gizbarim, like any other shvua of a shomer, that indeed I was not poisheya, in order for the messenger not to be responsible. Now, the big bomb question is, we learned this in the Bavas, that all of the dinim of shvuas shomerim is never to hegdish. So why are they swearing? That has to be clarified. But let's the Mishnah. However, the imlav, but if the first withdrawal did not yet happen, what does that mean? The way we're learning our Mishnah, we'll see in the Gemara nuances, but the Mishnah is, pshat is, if they didn't even make the first withdrawal on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, then the shkalim are not yet property of the temple, which means they are still the donors. So who has the loss? The donors have the loss. Now, the messenger has to make an oath now to the donors. Nishboyim libnei ha'ir, that he was not poisheya. But you know what? In the latter case, ubnei ha'ir shekel tachteim oigavalt, we have to give another half a shekel. Because we didn't achieve the mitzvah of giving it yet, because it wasn't yet halachically received, by the Beis Hamikdash. Now, in the latter case, so we're going to give Bnei LA twice 2.5 shekels. We gave it once, it was stolen, and we gave it again. So what happens if you find the original ones? Nimtzu, or Shehichziru Maganavim, or the Ganavim did tshuva. So says the Mishnah, Elu ve'elu shkalim, ve'ein oilim lahem l'shana haba. We don't get a credit. They are both shkalim for this year. Now, what has to be clarified is, what exactly do you do with these both half shkalim? It's not that they would both go into the tiklan chadatin box in the Beis Hamikdash. More details in the Gemara. Okay, let's move. Asks the Gemara, why is the Mishnah only saying that mitztarfan, that you can exchange it on darkoinos? Now, darkoinos is nice, but if we would be allowed to exchange it, we would say on a diamond, or the Gemara is speaking about a pearl, then it would make even a greater, it will be a greater service to the messenger, because he would take items that are even smaller, that weigh less, that have greater value. Oh, the Mishnah doesn't say that. You have to exchange it on golden coins. So the Yas, the Gemara, the Yas oisa margaliyos, answers the Gemara, no, because anything other than currency, its price fluctuates, and we never want to make the hegdish vulnerable. Shema tazal hamargolius, because pearls might go down in value. Now, when you live in a time where the government is printing, trillions of dollars, and the currency might go down, maybe the halacha will be different. today that's the sellers of gold, not golden coins. The money is garnished by gold. You have to make that evaluation. The point is we have to look out to give the minimum risk to the holy temple. Tamon, like we learned over there, that's in the Mechoros, that Vekulon, the Mishnah, they're speaking about the Bechor itself, or Hegdish that has to be redeemed, Niftin the Kesef of B'Shava Kesef. So normally Hegdish could be redeemed on Shava Kesef, but the Mishnah there says, Chutz Mishkalim, that the Ein Poidin Bekalim, you can't redeem it on Shava Kesef, which for example would be a utensil. And Ba'amar Shmuel Bar Rabbi Yitzchak, why? Shema Yuzilu HaKelim, V'nimtzo HaHegdish Mafsid. So just like the Mishnah writes it in B'Choros, the same thing here. We're speaking about the same Shkalim. Hufachi Nami Shema Tosad Amargolios V'nimtzo HaHegdish Mafsid. Says the Gemara that when our Mishnah spoke about that even in Medina you had these kerens, koronos, you had shoifrois, that's only betiklin chadatin as we explained. However, if a yid here in LA or anywhere outside Yerushalayim woke up to put his half a shekel, or if a woman opted, right, or if she gave her half a shekel after the third truma, that means after around Rosh Hashanah time, and therefore if she would have been in the holy temple, she would have put it in the box called tiklin atikin. In the Medina, you had no such boxes. You're giving it late, go to the Beis HaMikdash. This is not a punishment. This is for you to be inspired. People that procrastinate, if they would simply go into the Beis HaMikdash, they would only watch the Kohanim, how zrizim they were, they would be inspired to do things in a more timely fashion. No, that they didn't have. You gave it late, it's after the third Truma, then good, then you go to the Beis HaMikdash and you deposit it yourself in that shofet, in the Beis HaMikdash called Tiklin Atikin. That box, the Tiklin Atikin, was only there until the end of that year. Okay, says the Viking. The Tani Cain and Azoyam and Gelent and Abraisa, once we're already that fay, you start getting used to the Lashon over here. That Atikin Bamigdash, the Ein Atikin Bamedina. Now, Pik Habal, Pik Hasidus, there's an inner meaning. We learn in Hasidus, Atik goes to the level of Kesed, that when God is everywhere, right? So why do we have to go to the temple? The answer is God is everywhere, but God is not revealed on the same level everywhere. The level of Atik, Bamigdash, Baitik. Says the Gemara, Masnisin, it must be B'Shem Echinam. Because if the Mishnah, if the agent that's bringing the Shekalim is a Shomer Sachar, then Loy B'Dot can't be. Because just because it was Geneva V'Aveda, he's going to be Chayiv. There's no Shvua. If the Shomer says that it was stolen from me, a Shomer Sachar, pay. Says the Gemara, no. Amar Abba Afilu Teime B'Shomer Sachar. Guys, we learned this. We're going to learn this in Ezekiel. But however, there are two types of Geneva and Aveda that are not in the category of Geneva Aveda, but they are in the category of Oines, which is number one, Nignevu B'Listim Mizuin. If an armed robber, God forbid, held up the agent, that's called a Oines. It's not called Geneva because it's not that if he would have made a greater effort. What greater effort? When you're standing in front of a weapon, then don't be a hero. You're not allowed to do that. Or Abdu means b'mi, it's not a key. The greatest b'mi that if someone's ship, the ship went down, that's called an oinus, and a shomer sachar is spotted on oinus, but he has to swear that an oinus happened. Now, Omar Rab Yusti Bar Simen, I want you to know that our Mishnah Asya can only work Commander Omar, like we spoke about before from the Tikkun Chadatin, that determined that when they withdraw in the Beis HaMikdash, all of the three times, it's not only al hagovi, it's not only valid for the money that's already in that lishka, but it's also al ha'asad ligvois. That's why the Mishnah differentiated. Like, whose loss is it? Well, did the truma happen? Did the truma not happen? Biram, but Commander Omar ain't tremendous layla govi, layla mamushkan, layla asad ligvois, loy bedam. If you would follow the opinion that says that when they removed the truma in the truma salishka, in the lishka, it was only for the money that was in there. That means that until the money gets in there, it belongs to the donor. Then in all cases in the Mishnah, the Bnei Ha'ir would have to compensate. Weiter. Says the Mishnah, Bnei Ha'ir sheshalchu eshikleim. So like we spoke of, we learned the Mishnah is telling you that he has to make an oath. And if they already made the Truma the Beis HaMikdash, which means that the half of Shekalim belong to the Beis HaMikdash, so he makes an oath to whom? He takes an oath to whom? To the Beis HaMikdash. The problem is, like we mentioned, there's a rule, Ein Nishboin al ha-hegdeshes. That means all of the laws of custodianship, Pashas Mishpatim, Shomer Chinam, Shomer Sachar, right? Oaths are only to individuals. Now, there's another nuance. The nuance is, Let's say a person says, Harei olai oila. Harei olai oila. And I designated an oila. And someone stole it. And I gave it to a shomer. And it was stolen from the shomer. Does the shomer have to make an oath to me? There is one sheet that Rab Shimon that holds he has to. It's hegdish. Yeah. But remember the rule, davar hagoyim lemamin kamamin dami. Since I didn't say harei zu, I said harei olai, which means that if it's stolen, I have to replace it. So even though it's already holy, but it's also considered my property. So let's read it inside now. So Amar Rab Elazar, I want you to know that our Mishnah can only follow Rab Shimon, because the Rab Shimon Omer that by kachim she'uchay ba'achri yusan, they are kinechas of dami. Now, really, if you think about it, it's not going to fit. It's not going to fit because, harei olai oila, I have to replace the carbon. In the case of the Mishnah, after the truma was taken and only then it was stolen, then we don't have to replace it. It's not being goyim any mumming to us, so it's not going to work. The Gemara will clarify that. But the Rabbi Zajac says our Mishnah can only follow Rab Shimon. That's the way he resolves the question of Einish why not like Deisha. The oath that is taken in the Mishnah is not the biblical shvuas hashemrim, but it's a rabbinic imposed oath, mishum takana, mishum shvuas takana, and as let's learn a shtickle carbon ha'eda, that the first white line, that midoy raisa, the second line under the Gemara, midoy raisa patul legamri, because enachanami einish boin ala igdashis. It's only the Rabbanan who the tikkun law shelo yizalzelu b'shminas hagdashis. They have to know they're taking the half of shkalim. If anything happens, midrabanan, they'll have to take an oath. Now, let's go back to Rabbi Elazar, or how Yerushalmi calls him, Rabbi Lezer. That's the Amoida, that's the Rabbi Yechon Rabbi Elazar. What he's trying to find, why is it that he takes an oath when Einish boy now like Deishas, and he brings in Rab Shimon? It mamish doesn't make sense. Rab Shimon doesn't answer anything. Rab Shimon only answers if the owner has to replace the carbon, davar hagoyim l'mamain is considered his property. Fine. But the Mishnah is saying that if it was stolen or if it was lost after the first withdrawal, nothing has to be replaced. The owners are off the hook. It's purely Hegdish's loss. So asks the Gemara, the ayin dalad is al date, the Rabbi Yochanan is good. Nishboim ligisbanim, because of the shvuas takana and the ilav that the people have to compensate. Oh, that's for sure. Then the money was stolen from the people. Then Nishboim lebnei ha'ir ubnei ha'ir shoychtam acherim tachteim b'ateyim at base mishum shvuas takana. All of the oaths make sense, but Ella l'Rebbe Lezer meila Nishboim lebnei ha'ir. Right? Yeah, that will go like Rab Shimon, even though you don't even need Rab Shimon. Fine. As long as the halacha views those half a shekel still the property of the donors, and they gave it in the hand of an agent to take it, who's also called a shomer. So that's the classical case. If something happened and the shomer claims that, in our case, it was shomer sachar, but there was a oinus type of gnei aveda, so he's exempt. He has to take an oath. To whom? To the owners. Fine. But nishboim ligizbarim. Even if you follow Shitas Rab Shimon, so what? Once they already took the Trumas HaLishka, the first time, our Mishnah says it's already viewed that the Shekalim, even though they're not in the Lishka, they belong to the Beis HaMikdash. If they belong to the Beis HaMikdash, so it was stolen from the Beis HaMikdash. The donors don't have to replace it. There's no Davar HaGoyim L'Mamam here. It's pure Hegdish. Einish Boim, I like Deishas. How does Rab Shimon help? Yizbara Maya V'Detayu. So the Gemara clarifies, Nishboim lebnei ha'ir b'maimid ha'gizbarim. They have to take an oath lebnei ha'ir. Why are they taking oath lebnei ha'ir? Anaya nuance, the Gemara says with achap. Forget about money replacement. Dafke shomer sachar. A shomer sachar wants to get paid. Now think about it. If you send an agent to do something and he did not successfully do it because geneva v'aveda, which is an oinus, do you have to pay him for his job? Yeah, as long as he, with an oath, can say that I did what was upon me to do, then you'll have to pay him. So that's what the oath is for. Whereas the Hegdish's loss is the Hegdish's loss. But they want to get paid from the messengers. Who pays them? The Bnei Ha'ir. So if it was stolen before the Truma, then they have to make an oath to get paid without the presence of the Gizbarim, because who needs the Gizbarim? They're irrelevant here. But if it already belonged to the Hegdish, and the Bnei Ha'ir won't compensate, They want to get paid their salary. They have to take an oath. So there's a nuance. They have to swear that we did what we were asked to do. The fact that the ship sunk, that's not our fault. We want to get paid the salary for taking it until that point. But it has to be done in the presence of the Gizbarim. Why? Why? Two reasons. Number one, because we don't want, again, even though that the donors won't have to give more money and the Beis Hamikdash loses, but the Gizbarim are not happy that the Beis Hamikdash lost. In other words, the Truma already happened. So since they have to take an oath anyway to get their salary of taking it until the point where circumstances beyond their control stop their mission, but we want for the Gizbarim to see that they're making that oath, for there not to be a chashad that they pocketed the money. Or inami deloy nashvul l'poishim. They're not going to be choshed that they stole the money, but they can be choshed that they were negligent in their job of being a shliach. Gavaldik. That's the pshat. That's the pshat. Now says the Gemara that because of the rule, right? We're speaking all going to Rabbi Yochanan. Another prat. There always has to be an oath, and this oath, my friends, is the same thing we learned on the Amud Aleph for Rabbi Yochanan. A takana, einish boyin alei deishes is a din d'oraisa. But even when the Bnei Ha'ir are telling the Beis Hamikdash, we want to compensate for it, the Gizber, the messenger will always have to swear that he was not negligent. Because of this takonas, shvuas takana, that's what Rabbi Yochanan, that ein hegdish v'lo shvuah. Now, right, hifrish shikloi v'amad, another similar din meaning not that I sent it with the messenger. In your home, in my home, I separated the half a shekel and I lost it. Same question. What's going to happen? Do we say what we say in the Mishnah? Well, did they do the truma and the Beis Hamikdash or not? Says the Gemara. Rabbi Yochanan says, Chayiv v'achriyusay atshim tzedeno legizber. Always. Rav Shimon ben Lakish says the opposite. That hegdish b'reshus hagavay b'chol makom shehu. And obviously, if that would be the case, that Hegdish, since God is everywhere, so it automatically belongs to Hegdish, then our Mishnah contradicts Rish Lakish. Asks Gemara that Masnisha, our Mishnah, Pliga doesn't mean it argues with. It means it becomes a challenge to, it contradicts the sheet of Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Because what did we learn in our Mishnah? That if the Gneva Vaveda happened before the Truma, the Bnei Ha'ir have to give it again. Why? They gave it already, and it's already in God's possession. Lashem ha'aratzum loya. Nishbayim lebnei Ha'ir, bnei Ha'ir shayklum tachteyem. So answers the Gemara that loy oid hi mishum shvuas takana. Just like again we learned on Amud Aleph that the giving, the shvua, is taka not needed midoiraisa. Nor was then Chazal demanded to make an oath. So the Shlakish is not arguing with Rabbi Yochanan. If I separated my shkolim, I didn't even give it to the Gizbed, I didn't put it in the tzedakah pushka, then when a Shlakish says that I don't have to give it again, he only meant I don't have to give it mido oiraisa. But midrabanan, I have to give it again. The only times you don't even have to give it again midrabanan is that if it was already in the hand of the messenger. And the Trumas Halishka already happened, the first Truma. That is where I can say I don't have to give it, even with the Rabban. And as the Tiklin Chadatin speaks out, like if he has to give it anyways, he shows you various nafkaminas, whether the obligation is Midoy Raisa, Rabbi Yochanan, or only Midoy Rabban and Ishlakish, but let's move on. Two dots. Tunning. Now, the question is, the final part of the Mishnah, they found the Shekalim. I gave a half a shekel, you gave a half a shekel, the whole LA gave a half a shekel, and the agent lost it. Oinus. And he lost it before the Truma in the Beis HaMikdash. So we gave again, and now we found the original ones. All the Mishnah said is that none of them can be used for us for next year's credit. But on this year, what happens? Says the Gemara, Tani learned in the Braisa, that Harishainim noiflim letiklan chadatin. Like we explained again, tiklan chadatin is the box from which they would take the money and they would put it into the lishka. And if our coins had the good fortune, they were actually removed and used to buy the korbanos tzibur. They were not shiur halishka from the outset. But bahashniyim noiflim v'tiklin atikin. So you had this old tiklin atiklin, like we explained. This is half a shekel that was given this year. The tiklin atikin in the Beis Hamikdash, that shofar, after 2 weeks before Sukkot, after they removed it already for the third time, many times there were coins left in the lishka. So we're going to learn later what was done with those coins. They are called shiur halishka. The whole shofar of tiklin atikin was then joined with the shiur halishka. Now the question is, what's the first, what's the last? Which ones are the Rabbi Zajac doesn't clarify, and the Gemara wants to point out that machlekes hamoraim. Let me explain like this: when you hear about a mitzvah of giving something to the Beis Hamikdash, there's two opposite ways of looking at it. Either the mitzvah is on me to give, or the mitzvah is for the temple to receive. Now, when I gave the first coin and then it was lost, and then we gave the second coin, which made its way to the temple. So when you speak about the first or the second, from whose perspective? Is it from the donors? Then the first one is called the first. The first ones that make the lost ones. If the goal is for them to receive it, then the first ones should be the first ones that they receive. Let's read it inside.
One set that arrived, that's already in the pot. How are you going to go and pick it out?
Okay, so the Rabdani is just making a very important observation. That if the case was that they only found the lost ones after they put it in the lishka, then there's nothing to talk about. The case would be they found it before it came to the lishka. You're right. It can happen. It was lost and it was found. A guy stole it. He saw everyone in the city giving it again. He was inspired to do tshuva. Okay. Or what Bei Rab Hananya. And the other one is Rab Abba Mari, two Amiroim from Eretz Yisrael. Chadamar Elu Sheshaklu B'nei Tchila. It's about the giving. So the ones that we gave first is called the first, and that goes into the tikkun chadatim, and the other one goes to the tikkun atikin. However, v'charna nachamol, there's no aleph. They skipped the aleph. They ate up the aleph. They took the aleph. Charna amar elu she'giyu liyad gizbaram tchila. Okay, moving on to the next Mishnah. So when we are Danny speaking about by truma, by tamura, the one is there an ideal we learned over there? Which one should be used? Which one should be the tamura one? That'll be a first and a second, but yeah, very nice comparison. Okay, weiter. Halacha base, Mishnah. Listen to this. And we're gonna have three amazing cases with a lot of nuance, and we'll do the best we could to speak out all the details. Reuven and Shimon. Reuven says, Shimon, take my half a shekel, please put it in the box on the Beis Hamikdash. Aliyah, for me. Shimon comes to the Beis Hamikdash, and he says, you know what? I'm not giving it for Reuven. Giving it for me. And there was a guy writing down who gave what, because we learned before that whoever didn't give, they would go and they would take a security. So he got his name off the list. I'm paid up. Now, aside of the theft issue, did he steal it from God? Same concept. If Reuven's giving it means that it already belongs to the Beis Hamikdash, then he took it for him. Like the first Mishnah, if the Truma was already separated, so we view that half a shekel to already be in the possession of the God Almighty. So then his act of taking it from Reuven's, he's really taking it from God. He's putting it in his ma'al. Now there's a big problem here, because me'ilah is only me'ilah if you had hana'ah. But if he took it for him and he bought a cup of coffee, I get that. That's me'ilah. He's not keeping it. He's leaving it with the Beis Hamikdash. The Gemara will say, Ma'al, his hana is that they won't take a mashkin from him. That's also called hana. The Gemara will say that. Okay, now, Hashoikel, Shikloi, Minahegdish, another case number 2. And this can even be by accident. I have in my house money that I set aside for Hegdish, for Bebek Habayis, not for the half a shekel. So I have money that was set aside for Hegdish. And I took from that, it can even be Rishonim. I took from that the half a shekel. So you're going to be consistent. You're going to say that when I gave it for my half a shekel, listen to the details. When the Gizbar made the first withdrawal, not enough yet, and the Karva Habaima, and then he bought an animal, and then the animal was slaughtered. Means when this money was actually used for the half a shekel fund, and not now going to be used for the Bedek Habayis fund. Now you're chayiv me'ilah. Now hold on. Why are you not chayiv me'ilah right away? That's the bomb question. And if you're not chayiv me'ilah right away, what's about the first case of the Mishnah? So let's go quickly. So the Tiklan Chadatin, it's 9 lines under the Gemara. He says like this: Mina Hegdish, Shehoya b'yodi mois shehikdish lebedek habayis. And the person forgot, and he thought it was chulin, and he took v'shakonem shikvay. So the Mishnah says that if they already made the withdrawals from the trumas halishka, from the half a shekel, and the kana behema, and the hikrivua only oz nischayv hashekel karba me'ilah. Why? So it says the Tiklin, guys, we learned this in the Sechtas Me'ilah. Lefi she'ein me'ilah ella b'moitzias hegdish l'chulin. Me'ilah only happens if that which was hegdish now became deconsecrated. If it's still consecrated, then you did something wrong, but you're not going to be chayiv me'ilah. Aval hamoitzi minam hegdish lehegdish afal pi shenehenem. Same, I have the same hana. They took my name off the list. They're not going to take a mashkin. Ein a moil. Ela achar she'asa ma'aseh behegdish hasheni. Now the question is, does this apply to the first clause of the Mishnah? And many say, Rambam says yes, but he brings from his teacher, right? Rabbi Zajac quotes his teacher was the Gra, that no, dafka over here. Again, you have to push it. Remember the details of me'ilah. There is a difference whether me'ilah is being done with an item that becomes pogum. Like sometimes there's an article that the more you use it, the more it becomes devalued. That's one category of me'ilah. We learned that in Masechtas Me'ilah. Then you have gold. Remember, gold doesn't become devaluated. It doesn't get rubbed off. It doesn't get old. It doesn't corrode. Doesn't oxygenate the way silver does. Doesn't become black. So if you're doing me'ilah with an item that doesn't become pogum, then you're more machmir over there. Let's read it inside. Nami b'negea karva behema. And therefore, while miyad, why is that? Because the mitchila hugdash hamois lebedek habayis, and this person is giving his money for an animal that's going to be burned. An animal being burned is more devaluated than if they would buy gold and put a coating in the Beis Hamikdash that would last longer. So here you have to wait for the pigam to happen, and that's what he brings in the name of the Gra. I want to just speak about another nuance. I want to explain like this. When you have money that belongs to the temple and they buy an animal, doesn't that money become chulin? Because when I sell an animal to the Beis Hamikdash, I can use, if not, no one would sell anything to the Beis Hamikdash. So why do you have to offer the animal? We're going to have this in the Gemara in a few lines. It's good to speak it out now. We learned all this in the Elam. People always wanted for the Beis Hamikdash to have the least loss. Now, what happens, for example, if the Holy Temple seller, listen, if they bought a stock of wine, what were to happen if the wine became vinegar? If the temple owned it already, then it's the temple's loss. People did not want for the Beis Hamikdash to lose. You know what they did? Vendors, we'll see a machloikas about that. When, let's say, if I'm a wine vendor and Hegdish would give me money for my, I would give them the wine, I would actually consider that money still Hegdish money. I would not consider the exchange to be an exchange. I would own the wine. Why? For the benefit of Hegdish. Only after they brought it, now it can get ruined. Now the money becomes chul, and that's l'chayda what the Mishnah is saying. Let's go read inside the Mishnah. Okay.
So that would be Shekalim also.
That would be Shekalim also. That's l'chayda was when they bought the animal. No, it's even though there's a pagam over here. But the Mishnah doesn't only say that there's me'ilah when they bought the animal. The Mishnah says that they bought the animal the karva habeim. The animal has to be slaughtered. Like Rashi, and the Tiklin says, because until then the money is still belonging to Hegdish. No, when they bought it, the seller does not view the sale to be final until the animal. Maybe the animal will get a blemish. It was done for the benefit of Hegdish. Let this sink in. It's a lot of information, but we have to go on weiter. Now, third case in the Mishnah is a person had Ma'aser Sheni money, a person had the Mei Shvi'is. If you have produce that grew on the Shemitah year, really you're not allowed to do business with it. But if you sold it, then the money has the kedusha of the produce. Kedusha means you can use it, but you have to buy food, you have to consume it in Eretz Yisrael. There are certain rules that is imbued. There's a certain holiness in that money. Now, again, a person by accident They had a drawer with Meiser Sheni money. They had a drawer with the Meshvis, and they took from there the half a shekel. Says the Mishnah, Yoichel Kenegdon. They must eat food corresponding to that money. And what does that mean? We'll see in the Gemara what that means, and we'll get to God willing. Okay. So number one, the Gemara begins focusing not on the first case. The Gemara begins focusing on the second case. Second case was, I have in my house money that I already designated to the Berek Habayis. And betos, I took from there the half a shekel. Hashekel Chuli. Says the Gemara, Af Anan Kaninon, when we learned that im karva behema, that only after the animal was offered, only then is there me'ilah. I want you to know that the Tani, we have a Braisa that quotes the Shita of Bei Rebbe, that what does he say? No, the moment in nitrama hatruma, the moment they separate the money from the Truma Salishka, which is when, as we learned already in the previous Mishnah and in this Mishnah, that is when this money is considered being given to the Holy Temple. Then you have Me'ilah. So how do you reconcile this argument? How do you explain this argument? Here again, we will skip the parentheses. So the Gemara explains, Man kana im nitrama truma. Who is the author of the Braisa? That's Rav Shimon. To Amar Rav Shimon, like we just spoke out before. It was according to Rav Shimon, when a wine vendor sold wine, Rav Shimon holds, the money went out l'chulin right away. Because he knew that the Kehanim are so good in what they do, very small chance that the wine will turn vinegar. They'll be on top of it. If they'll think so, they'll use it for an asachim. There was no worry that Hegdish will lose out. Same thing with animals. Once the Beis Hamikdash owned an animal, they would make sure it will not get blemished. So therefore, what he means with nitra matruma, the way the Tiklan Chalatin explains, it becomes chulin when they buy the animal. That's the difference, really. Not when they do the truma, when they buy the animal. Our Mishnah holds, even after the sale, the vendors towards the temple did not allow for the sale to be finalized only when the item that is being sold to the temple is being used. That's our Mishnah. Now, says the Gemara, Vikasha, this is going on case number. No, it doesn't matter. Whatever the temple owns, the guy who bought it will make sure this animal will be used. It was very rare that something like this happened in the Beis Hamikdash, and Rav Shimon holds, therefore the vendors finalized the sale miyad, so therefore the money went out l'chulin, and yes, by davar sheyesh leit pagam, when it goes out l'chulin, that is when there is me'ilah. Let's go back there. Says the Gemara Bakasha, we have a question on the first case. Ilu hagoynef oilasi shel chaveri ushchatei stam. If I steal someone else's oil and I shecht it, so stama loy l'shem ba'olim harishayim mechaperes. Of course, it goes for the first owner. So my question is, on the Mishnah, if you gave me your shekel, God forbid, and when I gave it to the Hegdish, I said it's for me. So what that I said that? So what that I said that? Isn't it not still yours? And when the Beis Hamikdash is going to use money from the Lishka to buy Korban Tzibur, doesn't God know that that money belongs to you? How can I even steal it? Answers the Gemara that our Mishnah Amar Rabbi Yudon, that Tiftoid, you can only explain our Mishnah in the unique case, which is Bimisuyam. Let me tell you what that means. If you go to the Beis Hamikdash, as we'll see in a moment, as did the household of Rabban Gamliel, and they waited, they didn't give their half a shekel in the Chodesh Adar, on the 15th of Adar. They Pashut waited for the Chodesh Nisan. I'll tell you why they did it, not because they were procrastinating, God forbid. They wanted to make sure the shtick that when they withdraw the half a shekels from the lishka, they wanted that their half a shekel should be withdrawn. Even though halachically, like we learned on Amud Aleph, it was being done on behalf of all of the shkalim that were in there. It was even being done on the shkalim that are on the way there. It was even being done on the people that are yet to give their shekel. Once they give their shekel, the withdrawal retroactively goes for them as well. But some people said, I want my coin to be used. So you know what they did? The moment they opened the lishka door, they would throw their shekel into the we'll see, there was kupa aleph, kupa beis, kupa gimel, and the guy that withdraw their coin. My coin was used. In such a case, where the one who is withdrawing sees that the coin belonged to the shliach, and he thinks it's from the shliach, he thinks it's from Shimon. Shimon says it's from me. Then it's going to work for Shimon. What's if he would just throw it into the pushka just because he said it's his, it would not have any effect. But in the case of Mesuyam, since the guy that's removing it is having kavana for this ganef, he doesn't know that he's a ganef, then it will taka not go for the original owner. That's why there's a me'ila. Lamash, like this is the case that Michelle based Rabbi Gamliel shahoya mischavin v'doich v'letoich hakupa. Says the Gemara, hold on, that should we not consider? Should we not consider that what? That the money, the half a shekel that's going to be given, won't be removed, not on the first withdrawal, not on the second withdrawal, not on the third withdrawal. And we spoke this out earlier today, that what happened to all of the money that was in the lishka after the beginning of Tishrei. So that is called shiur halishka. Now, the Gemara is asking a question based on the premise that shiur halishka has less kedusha, and therefore there is no me'ila with shiur halishka. So how are we going to say that this guy that stole the money, he's a sinner, but why is he chayiv me'ila? Maybe what he took anyways would have fallen to shiur halishka. And v'chi yesh me'ila b'shirayim. Now, really, Rabbi Meir holds that there is me'ila even by shirayim, but we would definitely prefer that our Mishnah should not go according to das yachid. So, elake Rav Meir, it's only Rav Meir that says me'ala b'shirayim. Answers the Gemara. Didn't we just say that the case of our Mishnah was b'mesuyim, oiti b'mesuyim, like we learned, shel beis Rabbi Gamliel, shel meschavim v'tarmid l'shmoi. So, yeah, if you sent me your shekel, and I, God forbid, and I told the lishka, it's mine. And not only did I say that it's mine, so they wrote my name off the list, but I threw it on the pile right before the Kohen did the withdrawal. And he saw my coin in that withdrawal. He intended it for me. That's not shirayim. That is the case where the Mishnah says that, God forbid, I was moil. Now the question is, my nehena. Me'ila is not stealing. Me'ila means you have to have benefit. So of course, it went from being Reuven's to the Shliachs, but he didn't pocket it. He gave it to the Beis HaMikdash. And she's thinking about Rabbanan, B'Shem Rabbanan, the Taman. Isn't it beautiful? When you learn the Yerushalmi, right, we learned that they came from there, at Eretz Yisrael. We're learning Yerushalmi. Rabbanan, the Taman means over there. The Rabbanan from over there means that the Rabbanan in Bavel explained that Mekivin, Shebezdin, Ru'uyin, Lamashkein, for people who don't pay up, and v'loy mishkenai. So therefore, k'moy shenehena, that's called hana'am. Next, the final case in the Mishnah was, third case, that if a person had a meiser sheni money or shmita money, and they, by mistake, took from there the half a shekel, so the Mishnah said the words have to be explained. Let me just read that yoichel kenegdan vas meintos. So my meiser sheni v'chuli, so the Gemara explains what is the issue, and thus explaining what the Mishnah means with the final words. It says in a pasuk in Parshas Bechu Koisai, right, that when you have money, the money is Meiser Sheni money, so there is kedusha on that coinage, even though relative to other kedushas, it's a relatively low level of kedusha. But if money is imbued with kedushas Meiser Sheni, Kedushas korbanos cannot be chal on it, even though you're upgrading it. That's the nakuda here. It says in a pasuk, Ach b'choir asher yivukar lashem babehema lo yagdish is oisoi. If I have an animal that's a bechor, and guys, we learned this in Katsha Im bechor, relatively has a very low level of kedusha, which finds expression in many ways. If someone takes a bechor and he says this animal is an oila, he's upgrading it, right? Khalil, it's not halal because it's already holy with bechor. As the rule is, kol shehu kodesh ain't kedusha chala olav. I know that there are many questions on this, but there's not enough time. If you have a bias of tefillin shal yad, you can upgrade it to tefillin shal roish, mailan b'kodesh. When it comes to the Beis HaMikdash, if something is imbued with kedusha of a lower level, it's holy. Nekuda. Now, so what should he do? No, it's not. So therefore, since the money is Meiser Sheni money, guys, the half a shekel is holy. There's a kedusha in the half a shekel money. And it's holier than Meiser Sheni money is my money. I just have to eat it in Yerushalayim. The Mei Shemitah is not holy. I just have to buy food items. Half a shekel money, it's more than Bedek Habayis, it's Korbanis Tzibur, doesn't matter. Since it is holy, so then the kedusha of machzas shekel cannot be chal. So what should you do? Here's the solution. I don't know which coin it is. I took a half a shekel of my half a sheni money that is my sheni, and I put it in this big shofar, in this big pushka. I don't have to know which one it is. I have to take another coin and say that my sheni coin should be redeemed on this one over here, rendering that coin into chulin. And now there's room on it for Kedusha's chatzi shekel to be chal. And this new coin I have to use for whatever Ma'aser Sheni has to be used. That's what the Mishnah means. Let's read it inside. Kate said, maybe Selah shel chulin. And v'oimen, Ma'aser Sheni. B'chol makim shehein. Yiyu michololam al Selah zu. And v'oisa Selah, and the coin that I have in my hand now is nitzbas l'shem Ma'aser Sheni. But v'hasha'ar, and the one that I left in the box is nasu shkolim. The same thing goes with Kedusha Shvis. And that's important, Chavra. We don't dance around. We are Hasidei Chabad. We are designated to the Rebbe. There's no room for anything else, my friends. To be continued. A lot of information.
Great ending, Rabbi. That was a great ending.
A lot of info.
Thank you.
I love the ending.